Chapter 1. At 6 in the evening, Felicity Miller, catering to Preston Ashworth's tastes, had prepared a lavish meal of 6 dishes and a soup. At 7, Felicity had drawn a bath, placing Preston's favorite roses and aromatherapy oils beside it. At 8, Felicity had set out Preston's slippers by the entryway. At 9, when Preston Ashworth pushed open the door, she went to greet him. Taking his suit jacket, she placed his slippers before him. After hanging the suit in the nearby closet, she asked if he'd prefer to bathe first or eat. Glancing at his phone, he casually replied, "Bathe first." The hour hand on the wall clock made half a turn. Preston, wearing a bathrobe and toweling his hair, walked out of the bathroom. Felicity quickly handed him his pajamas. While he changed, she went to the kitchen to bring out the freshly reheated meal. Preston was long accustomed to her doing all this. He was in a good mood today, constantly looking at his phone, apparently chatting with someone. As she passed him while setting the table, she caught a glimpse of his lit phone screen. The name, Serena, at the top of the interface jarringly met her eyes. She calmly averted her gaze and turned towards the kitchen. The phone in her pocket suddenly rang. Felicity took out her phone. The screen displayed Eleanor Ashworth. The moment she answered, Eleanor Ashworth's voice came through. "Felicity, are you really going to divorce Preston?" Felicity looked out the window. Beneath the wall lamp, a cluster of night blooming cereus quietly bloomed. After a long pause, she finally spoke softly. "Mrs. Ashworth, you know that I was with him only because of that contract. Now the contract has expired, and Serena has also divorced and returned to the country. He's been very happy lately. He doesn't need me anymore." Eleanor Ashworth on the other end sighed deeply, her voice full of regret. "You've been wronged all these years. I know all the suffering you've endured. I thought that after so many years, your devotion would make him fall in love with you, but as it turns out, never mind. Anyway, Serena is back now, so I don't have to worry about him anymore. 5 years ago, you gave up your studies abroad for Preston. If you still want to go now, I can help you make the arrangements." Felicity looked at the fully bloomed night blooming cereus, her eyes losing focus for a moment. For 5 years, for Preston Ashworth, her life had been stagnant for too long. It was time to move forward, so she nodded. "Then thank you, Mrs. Ashworth. Please help me arrange it. I want to leave as soon as possible." After the call ended, the cluster of night blooming cereus outside the window quietly withered, just as her 5-year marriage was about to completely end. Her family was poor. It was the Ashworth Corporation that had funded her continued education, allowing her to succeed academically and even secure the sole spot for the university's study abroad exchange program. For this reason, before going abroad, she had specifically come to the Ashworth home to express her gratitude. She wasn't the only one the Ashworths had sponsored, but she was the first to come and show her thanks. This made Eleanor Ashworth, who had intended to dismiss her with a few cursory words, take a second look. After hearing her purpose, Eleanor remained silent for a long while before speaking. "If you truly want to repay our kindness, then do me a favor." From Eleanor Ashworth, Felicity learned the story of Preston Ashworth and Serena Vance. Preston Ashworth was a golden boy, and Serena Vance a golden girl, both born into wealthy, prestigious families. They were childhood sweethearts who grew up together. Everyone could see that Preston liked Serena, but because Serena had once said she wanted a slow, enduring love, he had always guarded her silently. Finally, after they graduated from university, Preston felt the time was right to confess his feelings. However, Serena suddenly got a boyfriend and went abroad with him. Unable to believe it, he chased after her to the airport that very night, but was involved in a car accident on the way. And just as he woke up after surgery, Serena had already eloped with that man abroad. Thereafter, he shut himself in at home, drinking all day. A once proud golden boy was reduced to a wreck. It was at this time that Felicity Miller came to their door, and Eleanor Ashworth decided to have her help him move on from this relationship. Thus, to repay the kindness, Felicity gave up her opportunity to study abroad and signed a 5-year contract with Eleanor Ashworth. At a banquet, she deliberately ran into Preston Ashworth, pretended to fall in love with him at first sight, and began to pursue him relentlessly. From then on, their entire social circle knew that Preston Ashworth had a woman by his side who was madly in love with him. Preston gradually grew accustomed to her kindness, but never took that final step. Until that night, he and a few friends made a bet on a yacht. Whoever's female companion could dive into the sea and find the ring they'd thrown would get the land in Northwood District. Felicity knew clearly that he had been sleepless for several nights trying to secure that piece of land. When everyone else recoiled in fear of the huge waves, she dived into the sea without hesitation. That was the first time Preston Ashworth lost his composure for her. He tightly held the rescued her, his voice full of fear and trembling. "Felicity Miller, let's get married. I'll try to love you." But Felicity later found out that he proposed to her that night only because Serena had posted on her social media a picture of herself and her husband kissing passionately under the aurora borealis. Even so, to fulfill the contract and remove Serena from his heart, she still did her utmost for Preston Ashworth. She cooked for him, diligently managed the household, and upon learning that his childhood birthday wish was to see a meteor shower, a wish his parents, busy with work, had never fulfilled, she spent 6 months searching for the best mountaintop vantage point to observe meteors. But that night, she waited all night, and Preston Ashworth never appeared. Later, she found out he had gone to find Serena. At that time, Serena's marriage had begun to show problems. From that day on, he would go abroad once a week, each time preparing various novel and interesting gifts, delivering them to Serena's doorstep to cheer her up, but without letting her know it was him. The day Serena returned to the country, he sped to see her, wanting to be the first to lay eyes on her, and got into a car accident. Felicity stayed by his side for 3 days and 3 nights without sleep. While unconscious, he called out Serena's name 999 times from his hospital bed. At that moment, Felicity finally understood that she could never complete the task Eleanor Ashworth had given her. Fortunately, the contract was about to expire, and Serena had also divorced and returned. Preston Ashworth had, as he wished, waited for the woman he loved. It was also time for her to leave. From now on, both of them could start new lives. Chapter 2: Who were you talking to on the phone? Seeing that Felicity hadn't come out for a long time, Preston Ashworth got up and went to the kitchen to find her, only to see her standing there, staring blankly at her phone. She snapped back to reality, calmly saying, "No one." In the dead of night, listening to Preston's shallow breathing beside her, Felicity lay with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling, sleepless all night. The next morning, looking at the Western-style breakfast before him, Preston couldn't help but frown. "You know I don't like Western food. Why did you make this today?" She lowered her eyes, picked up a piece of steak with her fork and put it in her mouth, chewing slowly. This was all that was left in the fridge. Actually, there wasn't. It was just that she needed to prepare for studying abroad and wanted to get used to the cuisine in advance. Fortunately, the man opposite her didn't think much of it. He placed his phone on the table, his gaze constantly darting to it as if waiting for someone's message. Without asking, she knew who he was waiting for. Suddenly, the phone vibrated. He immediately picked it up. Serena seemed to have sent something that made him very happy. The corners of his usually indifferent lips curved slightly upwards. Felicity watched him silently for half a minute before taking out the divorce agreement she had prepared long ago. From the moment she signed the contract, she had been preparing for this moment. Now she was finally going to be free. "Preston Ashworth, let's get a divorce." She spoke calmly, her tone as flat as if she were discussing the weather. Preston was entirely engrossed in his chat with Serena and didn't even hear her clearly, so he replied perfunctorily. Felicity wasn't surprised at all, because this was how he had treated her for the past 5 years, aloof and distant. Now that Serena was back, he had withdrawn even the last bit of attention he paid her. She turned the agreement to the last page, handed it to him along with a pen, and pointed to the signature line, "Sign here." Busy chatting, he didn't even look, just picked up the pen with one hand and signed his name where her finger pointed, while his other hand continued typing on his phone. Felicity put away the agreement and continued, "Preston Ashworth, after the 1-month cooling-off period, I'll be leaving." Preston still just grunted, then put down his knife and fork and got up to leave. Watching his departing back, Felicity finally couldn't help but call out to him, "Preston Ashworth, do you know what I just said?" He stopped and turned back, looking at her with incomprehension. "Isn't it about sending supplies to the Welfare Institute? Wasn't that the contract you just had me sign? You mentioned it a few days ago. What's wrong?" She laughed at herself inwardly. She had already gotten him to sign the contract for the supplies last month. He really didn't care about her, and he really hadn't heard her clearly. But it didn't matter anymore. Let it be. Preston Ashworth, just like this, be happy with Serena from now on, so she smiled. It's nothing. In the afternoon, Felicity drove, following the truck delivering supplies to the Welfare Institute. After finishing her work, she went to the director's office to say goodbye to Director Price. "Mama Price, I'm going abroad to study." Director Price was very happy for her. Felicity had been a gifted art student. When she gave up going abroad years ago, Director Price had regretted it for a long time. "Felicity, that's wonderful news." Director Price grasped her hand, beaming. But then, a thought seemed to strike her, and her face clouded over. "But if you're going abroad to study, won't you and Preston be in different places? Long-distance relationships are very difficult." Felicity looked at the children playing and running in the distance and shook her head. "We won't be in different places. We're divorced." Director Price was stunned for a moment, then sighed deeply. "I knew it. I was right from the start. This marriage of yours wouldn't last long. If he truly loved you, how could he have not come back with you even once in all these years? It's good that you're divorced." She lovingly pulled Felicity into her embrace, comforting her softly. Felicity smiled and hugged Director Price back. Yes, it was indeed good to be divorced. Chapter 3. After returning from the Welfare Institute, Felicity went straight upstairs and into the walk-in closet to start packing her luggage. It was only then that she realized how pitifully few clothes she owned. There were only the few sets Alina Ashworth had given her when she first married into the family. Her husband of 5 years had never once thought of buying her a single piece of clothing. After packing her clothes, Felicity took all the gifts she had given Preston Ashworth over the years and sold them for scrap. Over the years, to please him, she had meticulously prepared many birthday gifts for him. He had never even glanced at them. These gifts had been tossed aside, covered in a thick layer of dust. As she watched the scrap dealer's truck drive away, just as she was about to return to the villa, a car horn blared behind her. Turning around, she saw a Maybach parked in front of her. A woman in a red dress got out of the car. It was her sister-in-law, Phoebe Ashworth. Phoebe Ashworth scoffed at the departing scrap truck, then turned to look Felicity up and down. Just as I expected from someone from a common background, even selling cardboard boxes. Felicity didn't even look at her, turning to leave. The sneer on Phoebe's face suddenly vanished, and she lunged forward to grab her. Felicity Miller. Ever since Felicity had married into their Ashworth family, she had always tried to please them in a subservient way, never treating Phoebe so coldly. Now that Felicity dared to act this way towards her, a surge of anger instantly welled up in Phoebe's chest. "Are you deaf? Didn't you hear me talking to you?" Felicity turned and pulled her hand away, a trace of annoyance flashing in her eyes. Phoebe had always disliked her, feeling that someone of her status was completely unworthy of marrying into the Ashworth family. So, for 5 years after the marriage, Phoebe had constantly targeted her, either throwing away the breakfast she made or dirtying the clothes she washed. Now that Felicity was finally about to be free, she no longer wanted to humbly try to please her. Phoebe was about to continue her tirade, but then, as if remembering something, she gave Felicity an amused look. "It's good for someone like you to sell a few more cardboard boxes. You don't know, do you? My brother's White Moonlight is back. You, the woman who usurped this place, are finally going to be kicked out." As soon as she finished speaking, another woman in a white dress got out from behind her. This was the first time Felicity had seen Serena Vance. She had captivating almond-shaped eyes, shimmering like water, long, straight black hair casually flowing, and porcelain white skin. She happened to be wearing a simple white dress, with no jewelry, yet she still exuded an inexplicable ethereal charm. The 5 years of a broken marriage had left no trace on her. No wonder Preston Ashworth had been obsessed with her for so many years. Hearing this, Serena came over and gently pulled Phoebe's hand, her tone gentle. "Phoebe, don't say that about Miss Miller. She is your sister-in-law." "What sister-in-law?" "Serena, I told you in the car, my brother has always liked you. He's been thinking about you all these years, even going abroad once a week to see you. All those gifts were bought by my brother for you. Can't you see how much my brother cares for you?" After Phoebe finished speaking, she turned to command Felicity, "What are you standing there stunned for? Hurry up and take Serena's luggage inside. My brother has already agreed to let Serena stay here. Felicity glanced at the luggage, didn't even acknowledge it, and walked straight inside. Phoebe stomped her foot in anger behind her. In the end, it was the driver who carried the luggage inside. Just as Phoebe was about to angrily stir up more trouble, Preston Ashworth walked in hurriedly from outside. His eyes landed on Serena, who was sitting comfortably on the sofa, and he seemed to sigh in relief. He then spoke to Felicity, who was on the other side. Serena's house hasn't been lived in for years and needs to be renovated, so she'll stay with us for a few days. Felicity said nothing. In the silence, Serena bit her lip and stood up, her face full of unease. Preston, maybe I should leave. This is your marital home, after all, and Miss Miller seems a bit unhappy. Preston immediately reached out to stop her. You don't have to leave. She's always been magnanimous. She won't get angry over such a small thing. Silently watching this scene, Felicity finally spoke, a smile playing on her lips. Indeed, I won't get angry over such a small thing. Miss Vance, please make yourself at home here. After all, this home would belong to Serena sooner or later. Chapter 4, as if afraid Serena might still want to leave, Preston Ashworth immediately instructed the servants to move her luggage into the largest guest room. Phoebe Ashworth immediately turned to Felicity with a triumphant look. What are you still standing here for at a time like this? Go make dinner. Oh, and Serena can't eat spicy food, so make it bland. In this house, even if there were servants, Felicity had always been the one to cook. It was only because Preston was picky and had high standards. He wouldn't even eat food made by Michelin-starred chefs. Only her cooking was barely palatable to him. But no matter how much effort she put in, Preston would only take a few bites. Occasionally, Phoebe would also come over to eat, but she would always eat while complaining. At this moment, she calmly shook her head and uttered 4 words that surprised everyone. I can't cook. Hearing Felicity's refusal, Preston Ashworth subconsciously looked at her. In his memory, she had never defied anyone in their family. This was the first time she had refused. Just as he was about to speak, Serena's beautiful eyes suddenly reddened, and she lowered her gaze, biting her lip. It's my fault. I shouldn't have moved in. After all, I'm just an outsider, and it's not right to ask Miss Miller to cook for me. With that, she was about to turn and go upstairs to pack her luggage, but was stopped by Preston from behind. It has nothing to do with you. Then he looked at Felicity, his tone slightly stern. Didn't you say you weren't angry? What do you mean by this now? Felicity calmly raised her hand. Her index and ring fingers both had adhesive bandages on them. I'm injured. I can't touch water for a while. Actually, she wasn't injured at all. It was just that the contract had ended, and she didn't want to waste any more effort on Preston Ashworth. So, she had deliberately put a few bandages on her hand to use an injury as an excuse to refuse to cook. The atmosphere instantly froze. Previously, Felicity had managed all the household chores by herself, so the servants in the villa would leave at their scheduled times. Now, besides her, no one else in the house could cook. Even if they were to call the servants back, it was too late. Phoebe Ashworth frowned unhappily, her words full of complaint. Why didn't you say you were injured earlier? Are you deliberately trying to make us starve? She was about to step forward and accuse her further when Serena quickly pulled her back. Phoebe, don't be like that. Serena looked at Preston beside her. Preston, dear, I've been abroad for so long, and I've been thinking about that hot pot restaurant near our high school. Remember how we used to go there often after evening self-study? How about we have hot pot tonight? Preston Ashworth, of course, would not refuse Serena's request. His tone was gentle. Okay, I'll take you. When the group left, they also took Felicity along. On the way, Preston drove while chatting with the two in the back seat. As they talked about their high school days, Serena became more and more cheerful, and Phoebe could occasionally chime in. When they reached a happy point in their conversation, all 3 couldn't help but laugh. Halfway through her laugh, Serena suddenly seemed to remember something and looked at Felicity in the passenger seat with a smile. Miss Miller, I'm sorry. It's not that we're deliberately ignoring you, it's just that you weren't part of those memories. Not only was she not part of those memories, but she wouldn't be part of their future days either. Felicity hummed in acknowledgement and silently closed her eyes. Preston Ashworth glanced at her, a rare occurrence, and inexplicably felt that she seemed to have changed somehow. After parking the car, Felicity excused herself and went to the restroom first. She cupped cold water in her hands and splashed it on her face. She looked up at her reflection in the mirror. Her long, seaweed-like hair cascaded freely behind her. Her fair skin, under the light, appeared even more like polished jade, yet it couldn't hide the weariness in her eyes. Both had been married for 5 years. Serena's eyes were full of vitality, while hers were filled with exhaustion. Just a little longer, and she would be completely free. She told herself this. Upon returning to the private room, the 3 of them had already ordered their food. The broth should be clear soup. Serena doesn't eat meat, so more vegetables and no cilantro. Preston Ashworth said to the waiter beside him while looking at the menu. Even after so many years, he still remembered Serena's preferences so clearly. Felicity, do you have any dietary restrictions? 5 years. This was the first time he had asked about her preferences. Felicity sat on the other side, took a piece of tissue, and wiped the bowl and chopsticks in front of her. Anything is fine, except seafood. During this hot pot meal, Preston Ashworth focused solely on Serena beside him. He barely ate a few bites himself, instead constantly serving her food. Halfway through the meal, a dispute suddenly broke out at the next table. It escalated, and they even stood up and started fighting. Guests nearby rushed forward to try and stop them. But unexpectedly, one of them had a fiery temper and suddenly picked up the scalding hot pot and threw it at the other person. That person quickly dodged. Due to the messame, the hot pot came splashing towards their table amidst a chorus of screams. Preston instinctively turned sideways and sheltered Serena in his arms. Felicity couldn't dodge in time and watched helplessly as a large pot of scalding hot pot soup splashed towards her. Chapter 5. Instantly, Felicity was drenched in hot pot soup. Her fair arm immediately turned red and blistered, and a searing pain, like tens of thousands of fine needles pricking her entire body, made her unable to utter a single word. Felicity, Preston Ashworth quickly released Serena and walked towards her, a panicked expression appearing in his eyes for the first time. "Does it hurt? I'll take you to the hospital." She looked up at him, pain spreading throughout her body. Despite her best efforts, she couldn't manage to say a word. "Oh my God, Serena, how did you get hurt so badly?" Upon hearing this, Preston's attention immediately shifted to Serena. He rushed to Serena even more frantically. He saw a few drops of hot pot oil on her snow-white arm, which indeed looked exceptionally alarming. Serena pulled her arm back, her eyes red as she shook her head. "I'm fine. Miss Miller looks much worse. You should take her to the hospital first." "What do you mean not serious? You've been coddled since you were a child. Even a small scrape would make you cry for a day." "Bro, what are you standing there stunned for? Hurry up and take Serena to the hospital." Phoebe stomped her foot anxiously and didn't forget to wave her hand warningly at the group. "I say, is there something wrong with you people? If you want to argue outside. You've hurt Serena. My brother won't let you off." At this, Serena could no longer bear the pain and whimpered softly, yet she still insisted. "It's okay, Preston dear. You should go check on Miss Miller. She's hurt much more." This sight undoubtedly pained his heart. He could no longer care about the disheveled Felicity, scooped Serena into his arms and walked out. Before leaving, as if remembering something, he looked guiltily at Felicity. "Serena has been coddled since she was young and is afraid of pain. It's not far from the hospital here. You can take a cab yourself." It wasn't until the figures of the 3 of them disappeared from her sight that Felicity snapped back to her senses, enduring the pain while taking sharp breaths. Seeing her so severely injured and abandoned, a nearby waiter sympathetically approached, apologizing while administering first aid to her wounds. After taking painkillers, the pain finally subsided a little, at least enough that she wasn't so pained she couldn't speak. After borrowing a change of clothes from the waiter, she shakily went out to hail a cab and rushed to the hospital. The doctor, holding a cotton swab, pressed down on the blistered areas while instructing her to apply medicine daily to avoid scarring. Felicity closed her eyes tightly in pain, 2 nurses pushing a small cart passed by her. "If you ask me, President Ashworth is really good to Miss Vance. Just a few drops of hot pot oil, and he booked the entire floor and had all the dermatology experts consult." Exactly. Her wound was so minor, it was almost healed by the time she arrived. "If only I could have such a caring man like me." Ha 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 ha, don't even think about it. A man like that is a once-in-a-lifetime find. "Once in a lifetime?" Felicity smiled. Abandoning his severely injured wife to take care of someone with minor injuries, he was indeed a once-in-a-lifetime find. Only after her wounds were all bandaged did she thank the doctor and leave. Just as she stepped out of the hospital entrance, a message popped up on her phone. Opening it, she saw it was an admission notice from the university she had applied to abroad, reminding her to prepare an entrance piece for when she reported to the school. After 5 years, Felicity Miller once again picked up her paintbrush. After buying brushes and paints, Felicity didn't return to the Ashworth residence but went to Moonview Peak. The scenery at Moonview Peak was beautiful. A tranquil lake lay nestled among the mountains, its water as calm as a mirror, reflecting the surrounding peaks like a natural scroll painting. It was exhilarating. She let out a long sigh, and the pent-up frustrations of the past 5 years instantly vanished, leaving only a long-lost sense of freedom. Inspiration struck her. The paintbrush touched the white paper, and in the blink of an eye, a beautiful scene quietly emerged on the paper. No noise, no dust, only the chirping of birds and the gentle sound of the wind filled the mountain. For 3 whole days, she immersed herself in this beautiful scenery. It wasn't until she came down the mountain to mail her painting to the school that Felicity turned on her phone. The moment it powered on, countless missed calls and messages flooded in, filling the screen. All from Preston Ashworth. This had never happened before. Previously, only she would call and text him. He would never call her, not even return missed calls. Just as she stared blankly for a moment, Phoebe's call came in. As soon as she answered, a shrill voice came from the other end. "Felicity Miller, where have you been all these days? Do you know my brother has been looking for you like crazy? Don't think this will get my brother's attention. You're dreaming the position of Mrs. Ashworth can only belong to Serena." After yelling, Phoebe hung up. Only Felicity frowned. Did she hear wrong? Preston Ashworth was looking for her like crazy? What for? She wanted to ask Phoebe if she had made a mistake, but the 108 missed calls on her phone, indeed, showed how urgently Preston was looking for her. Chapter 6. With this confusion, she returned home carrying her artboard. As soon as she got out of the car, the villa's housekeeper came up to her, her face filled with the joy of someone who had survived a disaster. Several of them almost cried. Madam, you're finally back. You haven't been home these past few days, and the house has been in chaos. President Ashworth isn't satisfied with anything we do. He's been furious for days." Hearing this, Felicity understood. So he wasn't used to her absence and her care, but he should get used to it. After all, soon, she would be leaving for good. For the rest of his life, he would have to live without her. Felicity comforted the housekeeper, then walked into the villa, only to see that not even the lights were on. Preston Ashworth sat alone on the sofa. The moonlight streaming in from the window flickered, casting his handsome profile in a shadowy, indistinct light. Hearing footsteps, the man finally looked up, stared at her intently for a long time, his voice tinged with suppressed displeasure. "Where have you been these past few days?" She took off her windbreaker and spoke calmly. "I went to the mountains for inspiration." The man frowned. "Why are you suddenly interested in painting?" Not suddenly. She had always been a gifted art student. If it weren't for repaying her debt of gratitude, she would have gone abroad for further studies long ago and become an excellent painter. But she didn't tell Preston Ashworth this. She just picked up a glass of water, took a sip, her tone casual. "I just suddenly felt like painting." Seeing this, Preston Ashworth pressed his temples. "About the hot pot incident last time, I didn't intentionally leave you behind. It's just that Serena has been coddled since she was young and is afraid of pain. Even a small scrape makes her cry for a day. We grew up together, and I'm used to taking care of her, so I took her to the hospital first. Besides, you didn't object at the time, did you? Why are you throwing a tantrum and running away from home now? Serena's house has been renovated, and she's moved out. Don't throw a fit over such trivial matters anymore." Towards the end, his tone carried a hint of accusation. It was unclear whether he was accusing Felicity of running away from home or accusing her of being unmagnanimous, causing his beloved to move out of their home prematurely. But Felicity didn't care anymore. She gave a perfunctory response and, putting down her water glass, was about to go upstairs. "Felicity Miller," she looked back and saw the man on the sofa stand up. "I'm hungry. Make me a bowl of noodles." Felicity continued to hold up her bandaged left hand. "Have you forgotten? My hand is injured too." Preston Ashworth was slightly stunned, but Felicity paid no attention to his reaction and turned to go upstairs. That day, as she was coming out of her room, a set of expensive jewelry was presented to her. She looked up, puzzled, at Preston Ashworth. Preston Ashworth coughed. "About the hot pot incident last time, I was busy taking care of Serena and didn't have time to pay attention to you. This is compensation." Felicity looked at the emeralds in the box, a complex emotion flashing in her eyes. 5 years, a full 5 years. This was the first time he had given her a gift, yet it was for compensation, to compensate for his being busy taking care of his white moonlight while neglecting her. She suddenly remembered the pile of meticulously prepared gifts for Serena in his study. A wave of sarcasm welled up in her heart, but she instantly suppressed it. She had never hoped for gifts before, and now she didn't need them either. Seeing her hesitate to accept it, he didn't think much of it, just assumed she didn't like it. "I've been busy with Serena's affairs lately, so I had my assistant pick the most expensive one at the auction. If you don't like it, then..." Before Preston Ashworth could finish, Phoebe's voice came from outside the door. "Serena, I told you, my brother likes you so much, you shouldn't have moved out. Even if you did, you should come visit my brother more often." She spoke as she pulled Serena in. Upon seeing the jewelry box in his hand, she exclaimed in surprise, "Oh my God, bro, Serena just mentioned to me that she really likes this set of jewelry. I can't believe you actually bought it." Then she looked at Serena beside her, her eyes full of envy. Hearing this, Serena's face instantly turned red, and she shyly lowered her head. Seeing the hesitation in Preston Ashworth's eyes, Felicity, without a second thought, took the jewelry box from his hand and passed it to Serena. "Since it was bought for you, you should accept it." With one sentence, she made the choice for Preston Ashworth, resolving his dilemma. This was the first time Preston Ashworth's gaze hadn't fallen on Serena, but instead, he couldn't help but look at Felicity. For some reason, seeing her poised and generous demeanor, Preston Ashworth felt a little uncomfortable for the first time. He always felt that she was different from before, but he couldn't quite pinpoint where the difference lay. Chapter 7, a week later, it was the day the divorce cooling-off period ended. Felicity Miller could finally leave. She began to pack her luggage. Halfway through packing, Preston Ashworth sent his assistant with a haute couture gown, asking her to attend a banquet at the old family mansion. Looking at the gown, Felicity suddenly found it somewhat amusing. Legally, their marital relationship had already been dissolved. Yet Preston Ashworth was still completely unaware and was still asking her to attend as his wife. Felicity initially wanted to refuse, but thinking of Alina Ashworth's care over the years, plus some travel documents she needed to get from Alina, she still changed into the dress and went to the banquet. In the bustling and lively banquet hall, the lights were brilliant, glasses clinked, and the aroma of wine overflowed from the colliding glasses, wafting among the boisterous crowd. And in the center of the crowd, Serena Vance was surrounded and adulated by a group of socialites and debutantes. Many women looked enviously at the emerald necklace around her neck. "Serena, President Ashworth really loves you so much." "Yes, this necklace you're wearing was just bought at a Sotheby's auction. It's a global limited edition, symbolizing a love unique in the world. I heard long ago that a mysterious tycoon bought it for a fortune. I didn't expect it to be President Ashworth. I didn't expect that, after so many years, President Ashworth still hasn't forgotten you. I remember when we were students, he used to pick you up and drop you off from school every day. All those jellies and chocolates in your desk were secretly put there by President Ashworth. I remember once you two had a fight, and you ignored him for days. He sought advice from countless people to coax you. He even came to me once, Tusk, you don't know what he was like then. His eyes were all bloodshot. You ignoring him for a few days could have killed him. Serena, there's probably no one in this world who loves you more than President Ashworth. When he learned you eloped with someone else, he was utterly devastated. Later, when he found out you were unhappy abroad, he flew over every week to secretly see you, buying you gifts to cheer you up. Now that you're divorced, and I don't think he likes his current wife much, you two might as well get together." Yes, get together. Amidst the clamor, Felicity stood in a corner, quietly watching this scene, listening to others egging them on, narrating how much her husband once loved someone else. "Felicity!" A voice suddenly sounded from behind, pulling her back to her thoughts. She turned to see the person and almost called her mother. But then, remembering something, she corrected herself and respectfully said, "Madam Ashworth." Hearing this form of address, Eleanor Ashworth sighed but said nothing, merely handing her all the documents needed for going abroad. "Felicity, I've arranged everything you need for going abroad. The semester starts early there, so I've also bought your plane ticket. It takes off in 3 hours. Is there anything else I can help you with?" Felicity looked at the documents in her hand, a wave of relief washing over her. The thought of the long-awaited freedom and a new life made her hand tremble uncontrollably. Felicity took a deep breath to suppress her excitement, put the documents in her bag, and shook her head. "Thank you, Madam Ashworth. I'm already very grateful for what you've done for me." After a pause, as if remembering something, she added softly, "I only have one small request. If Preston ever finds out everything and asks about my whereabouts, please tell him you don't know." It was best if she and Preston Ashworth never met again in this lifetime. Hearing this, Eleanor Ashworth looked at her in surprise. "Didn't you tell him you were leaving?" What was there to say? That her approaching him back then was intentional? Or that her relentless kindness to him for 5 years wasn't out of love, but merely to repay a debt, following Eleanor Ashworth's instructions to make him forget Serena and move on from that failed relationship? Or that she was divorcing him to go abroad and never return? What was the use of saying it? His white moonlight was already back. Even if she left, he probably wouldn't care. Felicity smiled. "There's no need for that. I just want to leave as soon as possible and avoid any more trouble." "What, leaving?" A man's voice suddenly sounded from behind them. Felicity turned around and met Preston Ashworth's deep gaze. Her heart trembled slightly. She opened her mouth, wanting to explain something, but she wasn't sure if he had heard or how much he had heard. Fortunately, Eleanor Ashworth quickly intervened. "It's nothing. Why did you come over?" Preston Ashworth didn't ask further, just glanced at the cake on the stage. "Mother, it's time for you to go up and cut the cake." Eleanor Ashworth rubbed her head and refused. "I'm not feeling well. You two go up and cut the cake." Without looking at them again, she had a servant help her upstairs. After watching Eleanor Ashworth go upstairs, Preston Ashworth extended his hand to Felicity. "Let's go up to cut the cake." But she shook her head, holding up her injured hand. "No, it hasn't healed yet. You should ask Serena." A flicker of surprise crossed the man's eyes, as if he didn't understand why she said that, feeling as though something had slipped from his control. Why should I ask her? This time, it was Felicity who was puzzled. Why? Didn't he always leave her to go find Serena? For 5 years, he had gone abroad countless times for Serena. Now that she was actively giving him the opportunity, why did he look so incredulous? She smiled faintly. "Because you two have a good relationship. It's just cutting a cake, nothing much." Seeing her smiling face, indeed not looking angry, he, though still feeling something was amiss, didn't say more. He walked straight to Serena and whispered something in her ear. Serena blushed but still nodded, took his arm, and went onto the stage. They held hands and cut the cake together. Amidst the melodious piano music, their intimate embrace didn't look like they were cutting a birthday cake. It looked more like cutting a wedding cake. Halfway through the banquet, some A-listers left early due to health reasons, leaving behind mostly the younger generation. And these younger people had grown up with Preston Ashworth and the others and knew everything about him and Serena. Seeing them like this now, applause erupted instantly. Some troublemakers even clapped and jeered. "Kiss, kiss, kiss," teasing Serena until her face grew even redder. Preston Ashworth's earlobes also turned slightly red. He didn't kiss Serena, but he didn't stop the crowd from jeering either. Felicity didn't care. She took out her phone and silently calculated her departure time. If the flight took off in 3 hours, then she had to leave now. But this silent demeanor, in everyone else's eyes, became sadness. Chapter 8. Soon, a group of socialites, led by Phoebe Ashworth, walked towards her with sneers. When Felicity looked up again, she was already surrounded by a crowd. Phoebe looked at her with a beaming smile. "Felicity Miller, so what if you've been married to my brother for so many years? You can still only stand here dejectedly, watching my brother and Serena being affectionate. I told you long ago, my brother likes Serena. Being with you was just to heal from a broken heart. If you had any sense, you would have left long ago. How can you still shamelessly cling to my brother?" Felicity needed to hurry back to pack her luggage and didn't want a bother with these people, so she turned to leave. Who knew this group would become even more aggressive? An ugly duckling wanting to become a swan, what a dream. If Serena hadn't gone abroad, do you think someone like you could have become Mrs. Ashworth? Don't you know what kind of person you are? I advise you, if you have any sense, to voluntarily step down and get out of the Ashworth family. They pushed and shoved her as they spoke. Cat, got your tongue? We're talking to you, didn't you hear? Seeing Felicity remain silent, one of them with a fiery temper completely lost it and violently pushed her backwards. Bang, a loud crash. Felicity slammed heavily into the towering champagne tower behind her. Wine glasses shattered into pieces, and white wine mixed with red blood, a shocking sight. Instantly, all eyes in the venue turned to her. Preston Ashworth on the stage saw this scene, his pupils constricting. He quickly let go of Serena's hand and hurried over. Looking at Felicity, who had fallen to the ground covered in blood, his eyes were filled with rage. He quickly knelt down and took her into his arms. While telling someone to call his private doctor, he looked up coldly at the surrounding people. Who did this? Everyone was too scared to say a word. His face was extremely grim. Just as he was about to speak again, a bodyguard suddenly ran over. President Ashworth, Miss Vance suddenly said her stomach hurts a lot. You should go see her quickly. Preston Ashworth didn't release Felicity, just frowned slightly. Is it serious? The bodyguard looked anxious. Miss Vance is crying from the pain. This time, it was Preston Ashworth who hesitated. He looked at Felicity in his arms, a flicker of hesitation on his face. Felicity understood what he was about to say. She struggled to sit up from his embrace, her expression calm. I know, she's been coddled since she was young. Even a small injury makes her cry for a day. And you're used to taking care of her. Unexpectedly, Felicity had preempted what he was about to say. His thin lips moved, but he couldn't utter a single word. Felicity, however, had already staggered to her feet and continued, It's okay, go be with her. Let the doctor see her first too. I can handle it myself. For some reason, seeing her so indifferent, he felt an inexplicable panic in his heart. She had always been this magnanimous before. But today, she was so severely injured, yet she was overly magnanimous. So magnanimous that her eyes no longer held his reflection. This wasn't like her. Her eyes used to be full of him. When did she become like this? Preston Ashworth was about to speak again, but from not far away came the sound of Serena crying in pain. Finally, he no longer hesitated, just looked guiltily at Felicity. Felicity, I'll come see you later. I'll compensate you afterwards. With that, without further hesitation, he left her and hurried away. Watching him anxiously pick up Serena, cooing softly as he rushed out, a sarcastic smile touched Felicity's lips. But this appearance, in the eyes of Phoebe and the others, became the sadness of being abandoned. HMPH, I thought you acting like this would make my brother feel a little pity, but in the end, he still abandoned you. Felicity Miller, if you have any self-awareness, leave the Ashworth family yourself. Felicity ignored this group, borrowed an empty room from a servant, applied medicine herself, changed into a fresh set of clothes, and then limped away. Returning to the villa, Felicity went straight upstairs to pack her luggage. After bringing her luggage downstairs, Felicity casually placed the divorce agreement, signed by both of them, on the table. Just as she opened the door to leave, she came face to face with someone about to enter. Seeing Felicity Miller, Phoebe Ashworth immediately launched into a complaint. Where are you running off to? My brother asked me to bring you medicine. I really don't know what he's thinking, not staying by Serena's side, but worrying about you. He insisted I come over, making me look for you for ages. I don't need it. You should keep it for Serena. Felicity's face was calm. After speaking, she pushed Phoebe's hand away and was about to leave. It was then that Phoebe noticed the suitcase in her hand. Her expression changed drastically, and she grabbed Felicity's hand. What are you doing? Felicity looked at her, her eyes devoid of any ripple. I'm carrying a suitcase. What do you think I'm doing? It's obvious I'm leaving. Your brother likes Serena, and you've always been clamoring for Serena to be your sister-in-law. Now I'm voluntarily divorcing and stepping aside to make way for her. Phoebe's eyes widened at these words, and she stood completely stunned, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. After all, everyone in their circle knew how much Felicity Miller had loved Preston Ashworth before. How could she just up and leave now? She seemed to have figured something out, her voice even trembling slightly. Felicity Miller, stop pretending. You love my brother so much, you shamelessly insisted on marrying into the family back then. How could you voluntarily file for divorce now? I get it, you're playing hard to get, aren't you? Let me tell you, this trick won't work on my brother. Felicity's eyes were calm. Whether it's true or not, the divorce agreement is on the table. You can go see for yourself. Phoebe, you keep holding my hand. You're not reluctant to see me leave, are you? Hearing this, Phoebe instantly bristled and quickly let go of Felicity's hand. How could that be? I wish you'd leave immediately as soon as you're gone. I'll set off firecrackers to celebrate if my brother knew you were leaving voluntarily. I don't know how happy he'd be. For some reason, she said that last sentence with a distinct lack of conviction. Felicity, however, no longer looked at her. She said, "Then congratulations on all of you getting your wish," and walked out the door. Watching her unhesitatingly departing back, Phoebe, for the first time, felt that something had completely spun out of control. Her heart inexplicably panicked, and she anxiously called out to her. "Felicity Miller, where on earth are you going? Aren't you even going to tell my brother?" Felicity's hand, pulling the suitcase, paused slightly. She looked back at Phoebe and also at the villa behind Phoebe. To repay a debt of gratitude, she had pretended to love Preston Ashworth for 5 years, becoming the woman they called shameless for clinging to him. To repay a debt of gratitude, she had thrown away her dreams, her future, and herself. For 5 years, she had tried her best to be a good wife and mother, diligently managing the household, yet she had received not a shred of respect, not an ounce of self. She had lived such a suffocating life for 5 whole years. Finally, she had repaid her debt. Finally, she welcomed freedom. Felicity smiled for the first time, a smile so sincere, so carefree. "Me? I'm going to live a life that belongs only to Felicity Miller." From now on, everything here had nothing to do with her. Goodbye forever, Ashworth family. Goodbye forever, Preston Ashworth. She waved her hand as if liberated, and under the moonlight, carrying her suitcase, she disappeared into the vast darkness of the night. Chapter 9. 3 days later. Preston Ashworth finally found time to come back for a change of clothes. As soon as he entered, he habitually called Felicity Miller's name, but after calling several times, only a few servants appeared. "Where's Madam?" Watching the servants awkwardly change his shoes and take his coat, he frowned. The servant stammered for a long time before saying, "Madam isn't home." He put on his slippers and walked in. Not home again. Last time, after he returned from taking the hot pot scalded Serena to the hospital, Felicity had been like this, silently going off for inspiration for several days. This time, too, he had taken Serena to the hospital first, and before he left, she had magnanimously told him she could go to the hospital herself. Now she was throwing a tantrum and running away from home again. The annoyance in his heart gradually turned into an indefinable anger. Preston Ashworth had just reached the sofa when he saw the document on the table. Normally, he wouldn't even glance at it, but today, as if possessed, he picked up the document from the table. The 5 large words "divorce agreement" thus entered his eyes, and at the bottom, in the husband's signature space, his name was glaringly present in an instant. His face turned extremely cold, the light in his eyes vanished, leaving only endless, chilling darkness. He reached out and caressed his signature, discovering it wasn't printed or forged, but genuinely written by himself. But he had no memory of ever signing a divorce agreement suddenly. His eyes narrowed slightly. He abruptly remembered that morning, when they were having Western food. She seemed to have handed him something to sign. It was just that he was busy chatting with Serena at the time, so he hadn't noticed. Thinking back now, that must have been the divorce agreement. The document in his hand was crumpled, then torn to shreds, scattering everywhere. Felicity Miller divorcing him? This was undoubtedly the world's biggest joke. She loved him so much, loved him enough to jump into the sea for him. He had left her behind so many times, and he'd never seen her get angry. He figured he had been busy taking care of Serena lately, and she was just a little jealous. 5 years was enough time for her to get a little jealous. Anyway, she would come back on her own eventually. If she still hadn't returned, she would return. Preston Ashworth was so certain because, in this world, apart from Felicity Miller, no one else loved him to death. For the next few days, the servants in the villa tacitly avoided mentioning Felicity Miller. Until this day, Preston Ashworth brought Serena back from the hospital. Looking at the bland, tasting porridge in front of her, Phoebe Ashworth threw down her spoon and yelled, "Who made this porridge? Where's Felicity Miller? Tell her to make us another bowl." A nearby servant hesitated and said, "Miss, Madam hasn't been back for several days, so—" Phoebe's eyes widened instantly. Felicity Miller hadn't come back. She had always thought Felicity's talk of divorce was just a game. After all, their family was the only wealthy family Felicity could ever hope to attach herself to in this lifetime. Anyone would cling on tightly. Remembering the divorce agreement she had seen on the table that day, she looked up at Preston Ashworth opposite her. The servant said Preston had also seen the divorce agreement when he returned, but he hadn't taken it seriously and had just torn it up and thrown it in the trash. She bit her lip and glanced at Serena beside her, who was quietly drinking her porridge, seemingly oblivious to their conversation. Her brother had longed for Serena for so many years, and now Serena seemed to be reciprocating. Felicity had also divorced and left. Logically, her brother should be happy. Phoebe looked back at Preston Ashworth. He frowned slightly, apparently dissatisfied that Felicity had been gone for so long. Thinking of Felicity, another wave of resentment rose in her heart. She left, and that was that, but she still managed to unsettle her brother. After the meal, Serena was helped upstairs by a servant to rest. Phoebe looked at Preston Ashworth, who was still sitting in his original seat, thought for a moment, and said, "Bro, when are you going to make it official with Serena? I've been hoping for her to be my sister-in-law for years." Chapter 10, Preston Ashworth suddenly looked up at her. "What did you say?" Phoebe had always been a little afraid of this brother. She involuntarily shrank back but still said stubbornly, "Felicity Miller has divorced you, and you don't like her. Why not be with Serena?" "How do you know Felicity and I are divorced?" She swallowed. "Didn't you ask me to give Felicity medicine last time?" She happened to see the divorce agreement then, though at the time she just thought Felicity was bluffing. Seeing that Felicity hadn't returned for so long, she had no choice but to believe that Felicity truly wanted a divorce. After Preston Ashworth heard her words, his face grew even gloomier. It didn't take much thought to know that the divorce agreement Felicity had left behind wasn't a fit of pique, but a genuine desire to divorce him. The coffee cup in his hand was slammed onto the table. Felicity loved him so much, yet she still divorced him. He had spoiled her too much over the years. Besides, where could she go after leaving him? Call Madam. Tell her to stop throwing a tantrum and come back quickly. The servant opened her mouth, looking troubled. "We tried calling Madam before, but we couldn't get through." Preston Ashworth took out his own phone, opened his contacts, scrolled up and down, only to realize he hadn't even saved her number. Last time, his assistant had made the call for him. After getting Felicity's number from the servant, he dialed it on his phone. But all that came from the other end was a mechanical female voice. "The number you have dialed is not in service." Felicity Miller had actually disconnected her number. The man stared at the dark screen, his eyes growing increasingly furious. He abruptly stood up and walked out, startling Phoebe so much that her shouts from behind couldn't stop him. It wasn't until he was driving and stopped at a red light that Preston Ashworth calmed down. Where was he going to find Felicity Miller? Felicity had lost her parents at a young age and had lived in the Welfare Institute when she was sponsored by the Ashworth family. Amidst the honking of the car behind him, he turned around and drove towards the Welfare Institute. Looking at the tall man before her, Director Price's expression turned cold for the first time. She first asked another teacher to take the children away, then sat down in her chair. "Please sit, Mr. Ashworth. What can I do for you?" Preston Ashworth didn't want to dwell on her distant attitude, just looked at her. "I wanted to ask Director Price if you know where Felicity Miller has gone." He had wanted to say that the house had become a mess without her these past few days, but remembering the identity of the person before him, he ultimately swallowed the rest of his words. A hint of sarcasm flashed in Director Price's eyes. Married for 5 years, and this was how Preston Ashworth referred to Felicity. A pang of heartache struck her, which then turned into relief. Relief that Felicity had repaid her debt early and divorced him. Otherwise, a man like this was truly not worth entrusting a lifetime to. Director Price didn't even look at Preston Ashworth and began to attend to her own matters. "You were married to Felicity for 5 years and don't know where she went. How would I know?" "Mr. Ashworth, please leave." Returning empty-handed, Preston Ashworth slammed his fist on the steering wheel. Felicity Miller. He had always thought the divorce agreement Felicity left behind was just her throwing a tantrum. But now that she had disconnected her phone number and no one knew where she had gone, he had to admit she really wanted to divorce him. Yet he was filled with unwillingness. Felicity had clearly loved him so much before, why would she choose to leave him so decisively? Just then, his phone rang. Upon answering, Eleanor Ashworth's weak voice came from the other end. "Preston, come back for a bit. Mother has something to tell you." Eleanor Ashworth looked at the person before her and sighed. "Now that you and Felicity are divorced, and Serena has also divorced and returned to the country, you and Serena..." "Mother." Preston Ashworth quickly interrupted Eleanor Ashworth. "I didn't agree to divorce Felicity." Eleanor Ashworth's eyes widened in surprise. She took out a divorce certificate from the drawer. "But you've already gotten your divorce certificate. Didn't Felicity tell you?" Chapter 11, seeing the flicker of confusion in his eyes, Eleanor Ashworth was even more surprised. She had thought Felicity Miller had only failed to tell her son about going abroad. She hadn't expected Felicity hadn't even told him about the divorce. So how did they sign the divorce agreement? Preston Ashworth looked at the divorce certificate before him, his eyes darkening, a raging fire in his chest burning all the way to his eyes. He had only thought Felicity had signed a divorce agreement with him. He never imagined she had even obtained the divorce certificate, if he remembered correctly. It took a 1-month cooling-off period to get the divorce certificate. That meant Felicity had been planning to divorce him more than a month ago. Seeing Eleanor Ashworth's puzzled gaze, he briefly explained. Then he asked why Eleanor Ashworth had tried to set him up with Serena. Eleanor Ashworth smiled. "You were willing to die for Serena back then. Now that Serena is back and Felicity has divorced you, I was just thinking. Previously, everyone said he and Serena weren't suitable. Now that both were divorced, everyone was starting to say they were a good match." A sense of discomfort spread from his heart. "But I didn't agree to divorce Felicity." For some reason, hearing the words about divorcing Felicity, he suddenly felt flustered. In these 5 years of marriage, he had long grown accustomed to Felicity's care. If he divorced her, he couldn't imagine how terrible his life would become. Moreover, Felicity loved him to death. Her divorce was definitely a tantrum. As for Serena, he did like her. After all, she was the idealized love of his youth, someone he had thought about for so many years. But to make him give up Felicity, he felt he couldn't do it. Seeing the conflict in Preston Ashworth's eyes, Eleanor Ashworth took another document out of the drawer. When Preston Ashworth saw the 4 large words, "repayment agreement," on the document and Felicity Miller's signature at the bottom, his eyes widened instantly. "Mother, what does this mean?" After all, it was her own son. Eleanor Ashworth didn't want to hide it from him. "Back then, when Serena got married and went abroad, you, a golden boy, became so broken. So I thought of finding someone to help you get through it. And Felicity Miller happened to come to repay a debt of gratitude, so the two of them discussed it and quickly reached an agreement. As long as Felicity accompanied Preston for 5 years and helped him move on from that relationship, her repayment would be considered complete. To be honest, Felicity had done well these 5 years. But she also constantly reminded herself, which was why she always addressed Eleanor Ashworth as Madam Ashworth. Eleanor Ashworth had initially thought that if Serena never returned, she would treat Felicity as a true daughter-in-law. Who knew that just as the 5-year agreement ended, Serena returned, and her son got into a car accident trying to see Serena. Eleanor Ashworth was still hesitating how to bring it up when Felicity approached her first, proposing to divorce and leave. After Eleanor Ashworth finished speaking, Preston Ashworth couldn't hear anything else. His hands clenched the repayment agreement tightly, trembling uncontrollably, his mind a complete blank. What had he heard? So, for these 5 years, all of Felicity's kindness towards him was because of the repayment agreement. So Felicity had never loved him. So, after Serena returned, she was so eager to divorce him. But the love in her eyes for him couldn't have been faked, could it? If she really didn't love him, why would she jump into the sea for him? And why would she be good to him for 5 years? He looked at the agreement before him with complicated eyes. It clearly listed what Felicity had to do for him over these 5 years. The further down he read, the darker his expression became. from being responsible for his life down to every single household chore she had to do personally. Every bit of kindness she showed him was because of the agreement. There was no personal affection involved. Chapter 12. The last shred of illusion in Preston Ashworth's heart was shattered by the densely packed conditions on the agreement. Overwhelming emotions, like a bursting dam, flooded into his eyes, almost crushing him. With a tearing sound, the agreement turned to dust in his hands. In Alina Ashworth's eyes, her son had always been calm and self-possessed. He had only lost control when Serena got married and went abroad. This was the second time he had been so angry for someone else. Alina Ashworth ultimately swallowed the words she wanted to say. Preston Ashworth took a few deep breaths, forcing himself to calm down. Since Felicity Miller had signed this agreement with his mother, then Alina Ashworth must also know about her departure. He looked up at his mother, a hint of hope in his eyes. "Mother, you should know where Felicity went, right?" Alina Ashworth looked at him for a long time. She should know, after all, she was responsible for Felicity's plane tickets and other arrangements for going abroad. But Felicity had asked Alina Ashworth not to reveal her whereabouts. So, she looked at her son with difficulty. "Sorry, I can't tell you." "Besides," Alina Ashworth gave a wry smile, "even if I told you, it would be useless." Felicity might have anticipated this day, perhaps guessing that since Alina was Preston's mother, she would inevitably tell him. So Felicity hadn't gone to study in the country Alina had arranged for her at all. Disappointment instantly filled Preston Ashworth's eyes. He had never known Felicity would leave so decisively, just as she had suddenly burst into his world. But apart from a trace of regret, Alina Ashworth showed no other emotion, merely asking tentatively, "Then you and Serena?" A shrill ringtone suddenly interrupted. The moment it connected, Phoebe's anxious voice came from the other end. "Bro, come back quickly, something happened to Serena." When Preston Ashworth returned home, he saw several foreigners standing outside the villa. The man in the lead had a cool, detached demeanor, coldly looking at Serena, who was covering her face and crying. Preston Ashworth recognized him at a glance as Serena's ex-husband. He quickly walked over. The sharp-eyed Phoebe saw him and waved eagerly. "Bro, quick!" Hearing the call, everyone looked towards him, especially Serena's ex-husband, who sized him up and down, the pressure in his eyes making Preston's heart inexplicably tremble. Preston Ashworth walked up to Serena and looked at the man. "Mr. Croft, what brings you to the Ashworth residence?" Harrison Croft looked at him and sneered. "What am I here for? Shouldn't Mr. Ashworth know best? Serena and I were married for 5 years, and you were constantly harassing her. Speaking of which, we couldn't have divorced without your help, could we?" Preston Ashworth was baffled. He did go abroad once a week for those 5 years to secretly see Serena, but he had always been very discreet, and the gifts he brought were common items. Harrison Croft looked at Preston Ashworth as if he were an idiot. Although he and Serena had a whirlwind marriage, he had initially approached it with sincerity, hoping to love Serena genuinely. It wasn't until he fully controlled the family business and began the process of restructuring the family holdings, becoming incredibly busy, that he neglected Serena. Seeing the social media posts she made, he had thought about explaining things to her, but was always interrupted by countless calls. It was during this time that many small gifts, not readily available in the United States, inexplicably appeared around Serena. He checked the security cameras and found out that it was Preston Ashworth who had secretly placed these gifts at their doorstep. An unidentifiable rage ignited in his chest. He threw all these gifts in front of Serena, and they had countless arguments. Finally, Serena secretly divorced him behind his back and returned to their home country. Harrison Croft looked at the man before him. "Mr. Ashworth, such fine upbringing. You have a wife yourself, yet you still pine for someone else's." This one sentence made Preston Ashworth's face turn deathly pale. "I'm already divorced." Serena, behind him, suddenly looked up at him, a flash of surprise in her eyes. Chapter 13. Ever since she was little, she had known clearly that Preston Ashworth liked her, but she only saw him as an older brother. The night she learned from a friend that he was going to confess to her, she was preparing to take her boyfriend home to meet her parents. To avoid embarrassment, she married Harrison Croft and went abroad. Perhaps because the marriage was too hasty, Harrison Croft did indeed love her very much at first. But later, as his business grew busier, coupled with the subtle provocations from those women outside and his belated explanations. Cracks gradually appeared in their marriage. The social media posts she made were also seen by Preston Ashworth, which was why those gifts appeared outside her home. She knew Preston Ashworth was also married, and she was aware of how much trouble his actions would cause both their families. So she thought of quietly disposing of these gifts, but the day she threw them away, Harrison Croft caught her in the act. Countless accumulated conflicts erupted at that moment. Later, she secretly divorced him and returned to her home country. Her parents were far away abroad and couldn't look after her. Just as she was thinking of staying in her family's hotel, Preston Ashworth, who had somehow learned about her divorce, came looking for her. She was timid by nature. The boldest thing she had ever done was secretly divorcing Harrison Croft. Faced with the advances of Preston Ashworth, who had always liked her, she sternly refused, stating that she had a place to stay. But he acted as if he hadn't heard, forcefully taking her back to the Ashworth home. When she thought Felicity Miller didn't want her to stay, she felt a sense of relief, thinking she could use this as an excuse to leave. Who knew Felicity Miller would actually agree? Later, when her house was renovated, she took advantage of his absence and secretly moved out. After all, they had been friends for many years, and she didn't want to destroy their friendship. But every time she refused, it seemed to take on a different meaning in his eyes. This undoubtedly troubled her, and upon hearing that Felicity had divorced him and left, guilt filled her heart. She shouldn't have returned to the country. Harrison Croft didn't even look at Preston Ashworth, directly pulling Serena from behind him. Serena, Preston Ashworth instinctively tried to grab her back, but was blocked by Harrison Croft's bodyguards. "Serena, I was wrong about what happened before. I apologize to you, and I promise it won't happen again. Now, will you come home with me? As for the divorce agreement, I've applied to withdraw it." Serena was full of hesitation. "Serena, don't agree to him." Panic was visible in Preston Ashworth's eyes. He clearly knew the emotional scars Serena had suffered because of Harrison Croft over those years. If she went back, wouldn't she be repeating the same mistakes? Phoebe, beside him, nodded incessantly. "Yes, Serena, my brother is the best." Serena took a deep breath, looking at the hand Harrison Croft held tightly. She looked up at Preston Ashworth. "Preston dear, thank you for your care these past few days." One sentence completely shattered Preston Ashworth. Serena bit her lip. "Ever since I was little, I've always been weak and easily bullied, never knowing how to refuse. You were always the one helping me out, and I'm very grateful to you. Now I have the courage to refuse, but because I'm scared, I always cry when I refuse, which took on a different meaning in your eyes. I'm very sorry for the misunderstanding I caused. Felicity is a good girl, and I need to apologize to her too. Preston Ashworth, let's not see each other again." It's unclear how this fiasco ended. The crowd dispersed, and the villa once again held only Preston Ashworth. Looking at her son, who had become despondent again, Eleanor Ashworth felt both angry and heartbroken. Angry that he repeatedly fell into this state because of heartbreak. Heartbroken that his health would suffer again, and this time there was no one like Felicity Miller to pull him out. The successive blows seemed to have changed Preston Ashworth into a different person. These gossips were also spread by netizens across the ocean. Chapter 14, Italy. When Felicity Miller walked out of the art studio, her accompanying friend was holding her phone, showing her gossip about Preston Ashworth. "Felicity, look," she glanced at the screen while holding her art supplies, then said, "Oh, that's your reaction?" Her friend looked at her, puzzled. Felicity shrugged helplessly. "What other reaction do you want me to have?" Their circle was small. Everyone knew about her situation. After all, Preston Ashworth's car accident for love and subsequent marriage to someone else had caused a huge sensation. They also knew some of the things Felicity had done. However, their reaction was vastly different from that of the people around Preston Ashworth. Preston Ashworth didn't cherish such a good person and instead insisted on pestering someone else's wife. Truly shameless. Her friend threw her arms wide in an exaggerated gesture, her face indignant. "If I were you, I'd want to slap him twice," Felicity chuckled. From the moment she left the country, she no longer cared about those matters back home. Late at night, as Felicity finished her last painting, a harsh ringtone suddenly broke the silence. It was a call from another classmate who had returned to their home country. As soon as she answered, her classmate's excited voice came through. "Felicity, Felicity, let me tell you, Preston Ashworth has lost his mind." Lost his mind, she frowned. Only then did she learn that ever since she divorced Preston Ashworth and went abroad, and his white moonlight returned to the U.S. with her ex-husband. Preston Ashworth had become despondent, holing up at home drinking all day. If it were before, she would have already prepared him a hangover soup. Now, without her attentive care, he inexplicably remembered her goodness. Coupled with others' remarks about how good she was, his desire to find her grew stronger. Unfortunately, she hadn't gone to the country Eleanor Ashworth had arranged. He didn't even know where she was. To find her, he even neglected his company. He even dealt with all those people who had hurt her back then. Even Phoebe, who had looked down on her, was forcibly sent to Australia by him. This series of mad actions, if he wasn't mad, then what was he? Felicity fiddled with the roses on the windowsill, her eyes lowered. From the day she started repaying her debt of gratitude, she had only treated Preston Ashworth as a task, only thinking of finishing the repayment and leaving as soon as possible. The day she went abroad, she initially intended to go to the country Eleanor Ashworth had arranged. But after thinking about it, she bought a new ticket to Italy after landing. Since then, she had devoted herself wholeheartedly to her career, paying no attention to Preston Ashworth's affairs. Now, hearing about him, she only thought of one sentence: belated affection is worthless. Moreover, she didn't love him, so why would she care about his regret? Felicity, as usual, carried her artboard to the studio to paint. As she stepped out, she saw her friend Winnie Sterling standing at the door, waiting for her. After taking the bread from Winnie's hand, Felicity handed her the birthday gift she had prepared. Laughing and chatting, the two arrived at the art studio, only to be told that today's class was canceled because a very famous art master was coming to the university to give a lecture. They packed up their artboards again and headed towards the university. The lecture hall was packed with people. Felicity and Winnie desperately squeezed in, managing to grab the last two seats at the very back. With a knock on the door, the classroom quickly quieted down. When they saw the person who entered, the previously bustling classroom instantly fell silent. For no other reason than the lecturer was too handsome. In the art circle, they had seen countless good-looking people, but none were more handsome than the man in front of them. Only Felicity, after clearly seeing the person, suddenly held her breath, because she knew this person. Long time no see, Felicity. Chapter 15. The person before her smiled at her, causing her eyes to involuntarily redden. Frederick Shaw was Felicity Miller's childhood sweetheart, having grown up with her in the orphanage. He and Claire Shaw were a few years older than her, so it was always the two of them protecting her. It was just that fate differed. He and Claire were successively adopted by loving families. Only she remained in the Welfare Institute, eventually being sponsored by the Ashworth family. Looking at the frail girl before him, Frederick Shaw's eyes were full of pity. Under his and Claire's care back then, Felicity Miller had also been a happy little girl. But fate played its tricks, and he and Claire were adopted one after another. At that time, everyone was young and had no contact information, so the three of them lost touch. He had been searching for the other two all these years, and finally only found Claire. It wasn't until later that he saw news of Preston Ashworth's marriage on the Ashworth family's official website. Only then did he know that Felicity Miller had married Preston Ashworth. He also knew about the things Preston Ashworth had done and felt even more pity for her. A once lively and cheerful person had been tormented by this marriage, leaving her covered in scars. After learning that she had come to Italy for further studies, he and Claire discussed it and moved to Rome. They chatted for a while, and only then did Felicity learn that he and Claire were married and, to see her sooner, had also moved to Rome. This time, she could no longer hold back her tears and threw herself into his arms, wanting to vent all the grievances of these years. After meeting Claire at dinner that evening, the tears she had just held back flowed again. The three of them chatted for a long time again. Claire placed her favorite dishes in front of her and asked with concern, "Felicity, what are your plans for the future?" Felicity finished the last piece of steak on her plate and shook her head. "Nothing for now. The main thing is to graduate first, then either have my own art exhibition or find a job I like. As for returning to my home country, A flicker of confusion crossed her eyes. Return home. She definitely had to go back to see Mama Price. After all, the day she said goodbye to Mama Price had secretly slipped a sum of money into her bag. But returning home also meant encountering Preston Ashworth. Thinking of the crazy things he had done, her brow furrowed slightly. The couple exchanged a look and quickly changed the subject. Let's eat first. We can think about future matters later. We'll always support you. In the blink of an eye, it was late autumn again, and Felicity Miller welcomed her graduation ceremony. Looking at the scene before her, Felicity was filled with emotion. She had finally waited for the graduation ceremony that had been delayed for 5 years. Felicity, happy graduation. Felicity, happy graduation. Friends sent bouquets one after another to congratulate her, making her eyes redden again. At the final meal with her friends, Felicity also let loose and had a few glasses of wine. The bitter wine slid down her throat, and a wave of sourness welled up in her heart. Thinking that it would be difficult for them to meet again in the future, everyone cried and laughed, making a ruckus late into the night. A week later, Felicity Miller packed her luggage, said goodbye to her friends and Italy, and returned to her home country with Frederick Shaw and Claire Shaw. Not for long-term residence, just temporarily. Partly to come back and see Mama Price, and partly because she was commissioned by a friend to jointly organize an art exhibition with him. Seeing Mama Price, whom she hadn't seen for 2 years, Felicity's eyes reddened again. Director Price stroked her hand, and hearing that she had completed her studies and realized her dreams, her eyes were filled with gratification. As they chatted, Director Price suddenly spoke. By the way, not long after you went abroad, Preston Ashworth came to the Welfare Institute looking for me to ask about your whereabouts. Chapter 16, having not heard Preston Ashworth's name for a long time, Felicity Miller felt a bit dazed for a moment. Director Price continued speaking beside her. But looking at him, I knew he wasn't good to you, so I didn't tell him at all. After having dinner with Director Price, she returned to the Shaw Villa. Because she was only back in the country temporarily, Frederick Shaw and Claire Shaw had directly brought her to their home. Seeing her return, Claire greeted her, showing concern and leading her to the dining room for soup. After they chatted for a while about next week's art exhibition, Felicity went to her room to rest. Ashworth Corporation Building. Preston Ashworth stared at the photo on his desk for a long time, lost in thought. 2 years, a full 2 years. He had mobilized the entire Ashworth family's resources, but still hadn't found Felicity Miller's whereabouts. Looking at the youthful person in the photo, a bitter smile touched his lips. This was his and Felicity Miller's wedding photo, and also their only photo together in 5 years. People always wait until they've lost something to cherish it. He understood this sentence now. When Felicity first left, he thought he was just used to her taking care of him, which was why he was so unaccustomed to her departure. It wasn't until he saw the repayment agreement she had signed with Alina Ashworth and the subsequent events. Only then did he realize that his habit of her had long turned into love. It was just that because of Serena's presence before, he had ignored this love. Now that he acknowledged this love, she had long since left his world. The office door was knocked from the outside, and then his assistant, Simon Neal, walked in. President Ashworth, you've been invited to visit the new artists' exhibition being held downtown tomorrow. It was only after the divorce that Preston Ashworth realized how little he knew about Felicity Miller. When Felicity returned from her inspiration trip, he thought she had suddenly developed an interest in painting. Later, he learned that she had been studying art since she was a child. If she hadn't given up studying abroad to repay her debt, she would have long since become a rising star in this field. Perhaps to understand her, perhaps also to get closer to her. He would visit every art exhibition held in Glenwood City. Meanwhile, her classmate had already sent Felicity the list of media and entrepreneurs invited to this exhibition, so she could prepare. When Felicity saw Preston Ashworth's name on the list, she was stunned for a moment. Her classmate saw her expression and quickly said, "If you don't want to see him, you don't have to come out for interviews and such then." She smiled and shook her head. "It's okay." From the first day she returned to the country, she knew they would meet one day. She couldn't hide forever. Besides, what did she have to be afraid of? She had already paid back what she owed his family. They were just strangers now. On the day of the art exhibition, a steady stream of visitors followed the signs into the gallery. Preston Ashworth was among them. Over the past few years, he had visited many art exhibitions and had gained some understanding of the paintings on the walls. Every painting was beautiful until this one appeared. No superfluous lines, only the scenery of the mountains. The nameplate next to it bore the title of this painting. Freedom. Inexplicably, he thought of Felicity Miller. Married for 5 years, Felicity Miller had always revolved around him, waiting for him at home 24 hours a day. She had lost herself without a shred of freedom. Clearly the most ordinary thing, yet it had become her extravagant hope. Lost in thought, a familiar female voice reached his ears. He looked towards the sound and saw the person he had been longing for day and night. In an instant, his world suddenly became silent. His heart and eyes filled only with the woman before him. She wore a long dress, her long hair neatly tied up, smiling and explaining her work to the person in front of her. Felicity, Chapter 17. Felicity Miller frowned slightly. Before she could turn around, she was pulled into a long mist embrace, the cold scent of cedarwood invading her nostrils. Preston Ashworth held her tightly, his body trembling uncontrollably. Felicity, Felicity, you're finally back." Just as Felicity was about to push him away, a figure beat her to it, pulling the man away. The next second, she was held tightly in Claire Shaw's embrace. "Felicity, are you okay?" Felicity shook her head. Frederick Shaw looked at the man before him, his eyes cold. "Preston Ashworth, what face do you still have to see Felicity?" Seeing him, Frederick Shaw would remember all the grievances Felicity had suffered in those 5 years, and his anger intensified. Preston Ashworth opened his mouth, wanting to explain. Felicity stepped forward and stopped him. "Frederick, let's talk somewhere else." She didn't want the art exhibition she and her friends had worked so hard to prepare to be ruined by him. The coffee shop on the second floor. Frederick Shaw stood in front of her and Claire, questioning Preston Ashworth. "Felicity and you are already divorced. Why do you still come to disturb her?" Preston Ashworth looked at the cold face of the girl behind Frederick Shaw, his heart feeling as if it were being tightly squeezed, the pain making it difficult for him to breathe. Felicity Miller had never faced him with such an expression. The moment he saw Felicity Miller again, he had many questions he wanted to ask her. But in the end, there was only one. "Felicity, why did you divorce me?" Claire Shaw rolled her eyes. What a stupid question. Felicity looked at him calmly. "The debt of gratitude is repaid. Naturally, I had to leave." From the moment she signed the divorce agreement, she knew that the matter of her repaying the debt would also be presented to him. "So, all your kindness to me these 5 years was because of repaying the debt?" Preston Ashworth's hand trembled as he spoke, his voice tight. "Yes." Felicity remained so calm, as if remembering something, then continued. "From the moment Eleanor Ashworth had me sign the repayment agreement, our relationship was solely about repaying a debt. I constantly reminded myself of this, so after signing it, I immediately prepared a divorce agreement." Speaking of which, Preston Ashworth was the first man she had ever been with. She was getting married before even entering society. Her simple mind feared being diluted by the facade of those 5 years, so she had prepared a divorce agreement early on. Whenever she felt herself about to fall for him, she would take out the divorce agreement to remind herself. The relationship and the gap between them. Had she ever tried to fall in love with Preston Ashworth? Perhaps. But just as her feelings began to stir, he abandoned her time and time again for Serena. Any normal person would be exhausted, let alone someone like her, repaying a debt. It was already good enough that she didn't loathe him. 5 years is a long time, long enough for her to think this was how life would be. Yet it was also short, like an instant, and she completely broke free from him and went abroad. Emotionless yet realistic words followed one after another, and Preston Ashworth's face grew paler and paler. "Preston Ashworth, I have never, not in the past, not now, nor in the future, loved you, nor will I ever love you. Between us, there was only the repayment of a debt." Felicity didn't care about his reaction at all. She just wanted to quickly deal with this matter and then go down to handle things at the art exhibition. Preston Ashworth wanted to step forward and stop him, but Frederick Shaw kept blocking his way. He could only watch helplessly as Felicity's figure disappeared behind the door. This small incident did not affect the art exhibition, which was ultimately held successfully. To celebrate for her, Frederick Shaw and Claire Shaw specially booked her a favorite restaurant. but before the food arrived, a bouquet of vibrant, dewy roses was delivered. "Excuse me, which one is Miss Miller? These flowers are from Mr. Ashworth, specifically to congratulate Miss Miller on the successful opening of her art exhibition." Felicity didn't even accept it, just asked the waiter to return it the way it came. "Please tell that Mr. Ashworth I don't like red roses." Red roses were Serena's favorite. She only liked pink roses. Chapter 18, the initially warm atmosphere instantly stiffened. The waiter, holding the roses, was caught in a dilemma, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Seeing Felicity remain silent for a long time, the waiter finally left quietly. But this didn't affect Preston Ashworth. He continued to send a bouquet of pink roses to her art studio every day. Every bouquet was thrown into the trash before it even made it inside. At another art exhibition, Preston Ashworth specifically intercepted her, wanting to ask Felicity why she wouldn't accept his flowers. Felicity looked at him for a long time, then suddenly gave a sarcastic smile. They had been husband and wife for 5 years after all, yet he knew nothing about her. "Because I don't like you, so I also don't like anything you send." "Preston Ashworth, why can't we part on good terms? We're divorced. Shouldn't you be the happiest one?" He took a deep breath, his eyes like shattered starlight, his voice trembling slightly. He subconsciously reached out to grab her hand. "No, Felicity, I wasn't happy about divorcing you. I've gotten used to you in my life. No, it wasn't until you left that I realized the person I truly like is you. Serena, my feelings for Serena were just out of youthful unwillingness. Now she's gone too. Why can't we go back to how things were before?" A dazed look flashed in Felicity's eyes. Every day of the past was torture for her. She didn't want to go back to how things were before at all. She sidestepped his hand, her voice growing colder. "Preston Ashworth, listen to what you just said. You're just used to me like a nanny. It's just that other nannies wouldn't risk their lives for you like I did. Do you really realize you like me? Do you even believe those words yourself?" Preston Ashworth's face also turned pale. Since she entered the Ashworth family at 18, she had never seen him so crestfallen. Preston Ashworth had always been proud and arrogant, looking down on others. Now his face looked so unsightly, simply because she hadn't gone along with his words as before, but had directly pierced through his truest thoughts. She didn't spare him another glance and turned to leave. But just as she left the art studio, she suddenly received a call from Alina Ashworth. Thinking of Alina Ashworth, Felicity only felt gratitude. After all, it was Alina Ashworth who gave her a chance to repay her debt of gratitude. At that time, Felicity had just started university, and after paying tuition, she had very little money left. Felicity didn't want to owe the Ashworth family. Being able to repay the money the Ashworth family invested in her with 5 years of service was undoubtedly the best way. Both emotionally and rationally, she had to visit Alina Ashworth. Frederick Shaw looked at her with concern. "You and the Ashworth family have already settled your accounts. There's no need to go to the Ashworth house again. What if the Ashworth family makes things difficult for you again?" After Frederick Shaw was adopted, his adoptive parents also showed him many things about wealthy families and taught him many principles. There were other ways to repay kindness than helping Preston Ashworth recover from heartbreak. Yet Alina Ashworth insisted on a girl giving up her future and her studies to languish in a marriage for 5 years. It was truly disgusting. Indeed, Frederick Shaw was right. Alina Ashworth exchanged some pleasantries with Felicity, then shifted the topic to Preston Ashworth, her words subtly urging her to give Preston Ashworth another chance. Frederick Shaw was actually right. Preston Ashworth's heartbreak was caused by himself and Serena, yet she, an innocent party, was forced to pull him out of it. Her studies were gone, her future was gone, her freedom was gone. And it was beautifully termed as repaying a debt, making her suffer for 5 years and still expect her to be grateful to the Ashworth family. Where in the world was there such a good deal? Actually, she hadn't been willing at first either. If she could have smoothly finished university and gone abroad for further studies, just a year or 2 later than repaying the debt, she could have paid back the Ashworth family's sponsorship with interest. It was just that Alina Ashworth doted on her son too much, couldn't bear to see Preston suffer even a little more, so she eagerly pulled her down. Her son's life couldn't be ruined by such a small matter, but whether her life was ruined, no one cared. Chapter 19, Eleanor Ashworth looked at the girl before her, who had blossomed into even greater elegance. Besides satisfaction, her heart was filled with regret, satisfied that such a person would make a fine daughter-in-law for the Ashworth family. Regretful that Preston Ashworth had only been infatuated with Serena back then, thus missing out on such a good daughter-in-law. However, now that Preston had also broken off with Serena, it wouldn't be bad if Felicity Miller could come back and be their daughter-in-law again. After hearing Eleanor Ashworth's words, Felicity said nothing, merely placing a pre-prepared bank card in front of Eleanor Ashworth. The money in here is twice the amount the Ashworth family sponsored me with. If it weren't for that repayment, I might have been only 2 years late in paying back the Ashworth family's support, principal and interest included. The Ashworth family had always been charitable, and she wasn't the only one they sponsored. The money was just regularly transferred to their bank cards. Over the years, the Ashworth family hadn't sought out those they sponsored to ask for repayment. Perhaps she had been too naive and had just actively offered herself up. Now she understood, but she didn't have the energy to dwell on it too much. After speaking, she didn't look at Eleanor Ashworth's reaction and walked out with the bank card. Eleanor Ashworth was first stunned, then an inexplicable anger rose in her heart. But then, thinking of the Shaw and Croft families behind Felicity, she could only swallow this anger. Just as Felicity left the Ashworth residence, she ran into Preston Ashworth, who was just returning. "Felicity, why are you here?" There was a hint of surprise and delight in the man's voice. Felicity sneered. "Madam Ashworth wants me to be like I was 7 years ago, give up my future and career, and continue to waste my youth by your side." Preston Ashworth's face instantly turned pale. He suddenly remembered the agreement he had seen 2 years ago. In that 5-year repayment, Felicity Miller had to give up everything and wholeheartedly stay by his side. A normal person would go mad after a year or two, let alone her, who had to endure it for 5 whole years. Coupled with his attitude towards her during those 5 years, one could imagine how difficult her days must have been. Pain spread throughout his body. He clenched his fists and murmured, "I'm sorry." Felicity had long lost patience to listen to him. Without even looking at him, she brushed past him. Perhaps it was because of her words, but Preston Ashworth didn't come looking for her for the next few days. Felicity was happy to have the peace and quiet. Until this day, the Shaw family hosted a banquet. As Frederick Shaw's sister, Felicity Miller was also invited. Throughout the banquet, she was closely guarded by Claire Shaw, who feared she might have an accident. "Felicity Miller, what are you doing here?" a harsh voice came from behind. Felicity turned around and saw Phoebe Ashworth rushing straight towards her. After all, she was Eleanor Ashworth's daughter. Eleanor couldn't bear to see her suffer in Australia, so she begged Arthur Ashworth to bring her back. Looking at Felicity Miller before her, Phoebe's heart was filled with resentment. It was all Felicity Miller's fault. Felicity Miller got divorced, and that was fine, but she also caused her brother to send her to Australia. It took 2 whole years before Arthur Ashworth brought her back. Behind Felicity was a champagne tower. She subconsciously tried to dodge but missed a step. "Felicity!" Claire Shaw quickly grabbed her and pulled her behind herself. Phoebe couldn't stop in time and crashed straight into the champagne tower. With a loud crash, the guests all looked over and saw Phoebe Ashworth sprawled amidst the champagne tower. Glass shattered everywhere, and she was covered in bloody scratches. Phoebe Preston Ashworth rushed over upon hearing the noise, wanting to pick her up. But as soon as he touched her, Phoebe cried out in pain. Claire Shaw, beside her, checked Felicity Miller up and down. After confirming she was okay, she turned to look at Phoebe on the ground. The Ashworth family has such fine manners, rushing up to bump into Felicity for no reason. Did our Felicity provoke you in any way? If I remember correctly, 2 years ago, it was also Miss Ashworth and a group of people who pushed our Felicity into a champagne tower. Chapter 20. Hearing this, Preston Ashworth's outstretched hand froze mid-air, his expression complicated as he looked at Felicity Miller behind Claire Shaw. Felicity looked at the mess before her, her face full of sarcasm. Facing the pointing fingers of others, Phoebe's face turned even redder. She ignored everything else and pointed at Felicity. "It's all your fault if it weren't for you. How would I have been sent to Australia? Originally, with her family background, she could have lived smoothly in Australia." who knew Preston Ashworth was determined to teach her a lesson, even cutting off her cards. Every month, she could only rely on the meager allowance from Eleanor Ashworth to live a difficult life. My fault. Who was it that looked down on me and mocked me back then, and who sent you to Australia? You haven't even figured it out yourself, and you're still blaming me. Felicity said coldly, Phoebe, did you leave something behind in Australia? Hearing Felicity implicitly call her brainless, Phoebe was about to stand up and continue her rampage. Enough, Preston Ashworth turned to look at Phoebe beside him, his voice laced with a warning. Haven't you had enough of Australia yet? Bro, you'd say that to me for Felicity Miller. What's so good about her, she's short like a winter melon, no figure, no class, an orphan? Slap, Felicity suddenly stepped forward and slapped Phoebe. So what if I'm an orphan? It's still better than an ill-bred person like you. She turned to look at Preston Ashworth. Preston Ashworth, control your family. Preston Ashworth clenched his fists, his expression grim as he instructed his secretary beside him. Simon Neal, take Miss Ashworth to the hospital. Simon Neal no longer hesitated, quickly stepped forward, covered Phoebe's mouth and dragged her out. Felicity, Preston Ashworth looked guilty. I'm sorry about today, Mr. Ashworth. You're apologizing to the wrong person, aren't you? Felicity's tone was distant. She looked at Frederick Shaw, who had been hastily summoned by the butler. Today is the Shaw family's banquet. Frederick Shaw had already learned the gist of what happened from the butler on his way over. He walked over, didn't even glance at Preston Ashworth, who had realized his mistake and was apologizing to him, but looked caringly at his wife and sister. Are you hurt? Seeing them both shake their heads. Frederick Shaw then looked at Preston Ashworth. My assistant will discuss compensation with Mr. Ashworth for today's farce. With that, he had the butler escort the two of them upstairs to rest. This banquet was not ruined by a small incident. It wasn't until late at night that Preston Ashworth, after discussing compensation with the Shaw family's butler, returned to the Ashworth residence. Only then did he discover that the Ashworth house was brightly lit. The maid, seeing him return, hurried forward anxiously. Young master, please go persuade the master and madam. Miss is still young, after all. Preston Ashworth listened as he walked through the door and, at a glance, saw Phoebe Ashworth kneeling on the ground with several slap marks on her face, and on the sofa on the other side. Eleanor Ashworth lowered her eyes, crying softly, while Arthur Ashworth held a whip, looking angrily at Phoebe. I see you've been spoiled rotten all these years. Who is Felicity Miller? What is the status of the Shaw family? And you dare to provoke them? Most of the Ashworth family's businesses were overseas, so Arthur Ashworth often stayed abroad for work, leaving all domestic matters to Eleanor Ashworth's care. It wasn't until this year that Arthur Ashworth shifted his focus back to the country. After hearing from the butler about what they had done all these years, Arthur Ashworth felt faint repeatedly. Since you don't understand the rules, then you stay in Australia and don't come back for the rest of your life. Dad, Phoebe, kneeling on the ground, screamed. Preston Ashworth, beside her, also quickly went up to help her out. Dad, sister is still young. Young what, she's over 20 and still acts without thinking. You two, what else is in your head besides romance? Eleanor Ashworth, seeing her children being scolded, couldn't help but defend them. Arthur Ashworth, hearing Eleanor's voice, only then remembered he had forgotten Eleanor too. And you, a doting mother, spoils her children. Hearing that his carefully cultivated son had been hospitalized twice in car accidents for a woman, and was constantly moping around, the anger that had barely subsided in his eyes flared up again. Those two are insensible, and you join in the foolishness. Your son is willing to die for a woman. Just let him die. The Ashworth family isn't without other children. You had to destroy a girl's 5 years of youth and future. Your daughter, too, at this age, what hasn't she learned? She insists on learning those bad things, not only disrespecting her sister-in-law, but also bullying her elders. What have you been teaching all these years? Preston Ashworth, hearing his mother and sister being scolded, felt increasingly unbearable, but one look from Arthur Ashworth froze him in place. You and your sister, get to the study. I'll deal with you later. Chapter 21, the empty living room was left with only Arthur Ashworth and Eleanor Ashworth. Arthur Ashworth looked at this second wife, his eyes full of disappointment. Before going abroad, he knew he would be very busy, so he left his long-time assistant and butler behind to help her manage domestic affairs. But before he had even been abroad for a month, both the assistant and the butler came to him. Upon asking, he learned that Alina Ashworth, in her new position, had made sweeping changes, firing both of them immediately and replacing them with her own people. Later, while abroad, he heard about Preston Ashworth's 2 car accidents for his white moonlight and his abandonment of his wife. Only then did he realize that Alina Ashworth had inadvertently ruined Preston. Their Ashworth family members had always been ruthless and decisive, never hindered by emotions, always prioritizing family interests. Even the greatest emotional wounds could be overcome quickly on their own, not requiring 5 years of help from a woman. And Phoebe Ashworth had also been domineering and unruly these years, bullying classmates at school, while Alina Ashworth only gave a sum of money to dismiss those who were bullied, never saying a harsh word to Phoebe. This also led to Felicity Miller being bullied by the siblings after marrying into the family. And Alina Ashworth, the head of the household, didn't manage it at all. "From now on, I will stay in the country. Your health is not good, so go to the mountain villa to recuperate." One sentence sealed Alina Ashworth's fate for the rest of her life. She looked at the man before her, tears streaming down her face. "Do you hate me that much?" Arthur Ashworth looked at his wife. "If I truly hated you, the divorce papers would have been in front of you the day I returned to the country." With that, he no longer looked at Alina Ashworth's reaction and walked straight to the study. In the study, Preston Ashworth and Phoebe Ashworth looked at their father, silent. In the siblings' memory, their father had always been abroad and rarely returned. They were closer to Alina Ashworth. The atmosphere in the study was oppressive. The hour hand of the wall clock ticked round and round before Arthur Ashworth finally spoke with a grim face. "Phoebe, you will stay in Australia from now on. I will have someone keep your passport and other documents. You are not allowed to return to the country without my permission. As for you," Arthur Ashworth looked up at his son, his eyes filled with nothing but disappointment. "For chasing a woman, take a look at the company's financial report. Is it any good? From now on, the position of CEO will be temporarily filled by your second uncle's son. You will start from the grassroots level. We'll talk about the CEO position when you are capable enough. Both of your cards are frozen. My assistant will give you $10,000 USD a month for living expenses. Your shares are also temporarily reclaimed. We'll talk about it when you truly understand things." With every sentence Arthur Ashworth spoke, Phoebe's face turned a shade paler. Preston Ashworth beside her said nothing, but his hands hanging by his sides were tightly clenched. The news of the Ashworth Corporation's CEO being replaced quickly swept through their entire social circle. Claire Shaw excitedly told Felicity Miller while helping her pack her luggage. "You've only been back for less than a month. Are you going back to Italy already?" Felicity Miller placed the last folded piece of clothing into the suitcase. "I have to go." Originally, she had only returned to organize an art exhibition with a classmate. After the exhibition, she was supposed to leave. But the Shaw family's affairs were complicated, so Frederick Shaw and his wife had to stay in the country for now and would find her abroad after things were settled. Moreover, if she didn't leave, she was bound to encounter Preston Ashworth. Now that he was no longer the CEO, he had more free time, and she really didn't have the energy to continue getting entangled with him. Chapter 22, Felicity Miller closed her suitcase and placed it by the door. Claire Shaw hurried over, staring at her curiously. "Do you still remember Serena Vance?" Felicity's hand paused. Serena? She hadn't heard that name in a long time, only remembering that Serena had returned to the U.S. with her ex-husband. She hadn't bothered to inquire about what happened afterwards. Claire tapped her phone, opened an entertainment news article from the U.S., and handed it to her. Serena had a miscarriage. Felicity's eyes widened. After reading the news, she learned that after Serena returned to the U.S. with her ex-husband, Harrison Croft, her life hadn't been very good. Although Harrison protected Serena, his family was very dissatisfied with her actions. Under their constant criticism, Serena, distraught, fell down the stairs. And just then, news of Harrison Croft's affair with another woman was exposed. Under various factors, the two had another argument. They didn't know what happened afterwards. Claire put away her phone. Because the Shaw family also had dealings with the Croft family, Serena, after learning Felicity was her sister-in-law figure Frederick's sister, asked Claire to apologize to Felicity on her behalf. Felicity listened to her words in silence. Logically, she and Serena should have had no interaction. When she married Preston Ashworth, Serena had already married and gone abroad. If it weren't for Preston Ashworth constantly wavering between her and Serena, they wouldn't have reached this point. In the end, it was Preston Ashworth who was to blame. Learning that Felicity Miller was returning to Italy and would not be coming back, her friends in the country threw her a farewell party. In the private room, wine bottles were emptied one after another. They still felt it wasn't enough and moved on to a club. Because she was worried about Claire, she didn't go to the next venue. After waving goodbye to her friends, she stood by the roadside, about to hail a cab home, when a car horn sounded beside her. "Felicity, get in." Recognizing the person in the car as Preston Ashworth, she subconsciously frowned and took a few steps back. But the other person seemed determined not to leave unless she got in. Several cars were also parked behind his, honking. Finally, Felicity got into the back seat. Preston Ashworth smiled without saying anything, started the car, and drove off. Until the car engine stopped outside the Shaw residence, neither of them had said a word. Just as she was about to thank him and get out, Preston Ashworth in the front suddenly called out to her. "Felicity." Felicity's hand on the car door handle froze. She looked at the man before her, puzzled. "Felicity, if it weren't for that repayment, if it weren't for Serena, would we still be together?" His words carried a hint of hope. As if hearing a joke, Felicity laughed out loud, saying word by word, "Given how you've been obsessed with Serena for so many years, we were destined to have no future." From the rearview mirror, he clearly saw how cold the woman in the back seat was. "And even without those things, we couldn't possibly be together. As a husband, you never understood me at all. You didn't know my dietary restrictions, you didn't know my phone number, and you never thought to give me gifts. You never cared about me from beginning to end. You thought I was dispensable. It's only because I tried so hard to be good to you for these 5 years that you're unaccustomed to my leaving. That's not real affection. What is real affection? It's being faithful from beginning to end. It's exchanging sincerity for sincerity. It's clearly remembering everything about me. It's eliminating all unfavorable factors when you're sure you want to grow old with me. It's firmly standing by my side, believing in me, protecting me, listening to my explanations. When we have misunderstandings, it's not being unable to communicate. When something happens to me, it's choosing me firmly and without hesitation. Which of these things can you do? A young master meticulously raised since childhood, only thinking about others loving him, never thinking about how to love others himself. If Preston Ashworth had known even a little, he wouldn't have repeatedly gone abroad to find his white moonlight while married, nor would he have repeatedly and secretly comforted Serena while she was married, causing unnecessary misunderstandings for Serena and her husband. Chapter 23, Felicity Miller paid no mind to his reaction and continued speaking. "Without that repayment, we would never have met. I would have had my own life." Preston Ashworth stared at her blankly, bitterness filling his throat. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but ultimately said nothing. He just silently watched her open the door and get out of the car. Just as Felicity was about to enter the villa, a pair of high beams suddenly shone on her face. She instinctively raised her hand to shield her eyes. Then she heard a sharp screech of brakes and Preston Ashworth's panicked voice. "Felicity." The culprit of this car accident was Phoebe Ashworth, now completely consumed by unwillingness. Thinking that Felicity Miller was the cause of all this, she disregarded everything, broke free from the bodyguard's restraint, and drove her car straight at her. Who knew that Preston Ashworth, with quick reflexes, pushed her aside? Apart from a few minor abrasions, she had no other injuries. Preston Ashworth, on the other hand, because Phoebe kept stepping on the accelerator. Not only were Preston Ashworth's legs crippled, but he also lay in the ICU for over a month, before the Shaw and Croft families could even intervene. Arthur Ashworth, upon learning this news, directly sent Phoebe Ashworth to prison. As for when she would get out, it was unclear. During his hospitalization, Felicity Miller had visited Preston Ashworth. After all, he had risked his life to save hers. Looking at the man covered in breathing tubes, she sighed deeply. Her eyes were full of complex emotions. Preston Ashworth had ultimately listened to what she said in the car that day, but for her, it was too late, far too late. The reason Preston Ashworth saved her was merely a belated compensation. Felicity Miller looked at him for a long time before finally getting up and leaving. Because of her car accident, her original plan to return to Italy had to be postponed. For the following months, she recuperated at the Shaw residence. One morning, Felicity Miller heard that Preston Ashworth had woken up. Upon learning that the person who hit him was Phoebe Ashworth and that his own legs were crippled, he showed no reaction, instead remaining exceptionally quiet. Until this day, Felicity Miller was packing her luggage again. She found a ring in a drawer. This was the ring she had found when she jumped into the sea back then. Later, Preston Ashworth used this ring to propose to her. Over 7 years, because of improper maintenance, the diamond embedded in the ring had long since fallen off, and the band itself had rusted. She caressed the ring for a long time. Perhaps the question Preston Ashworth asked her in the car that day, this ring was the best answer. In their 5 years of marriage, she had always been the one giving unilaterally, while he enjoyed the fruits of her efforts. Without mutual careful cultivation, their marriage, like this ring, had long since rusted. So, regardless of those external factors, their marriage, without his contribution, could never have reached its end. She placed the ring back in its box and asked the butler to pass it on to Preston Ashworth. When Preston Ashworth saw this ring, he stared blankly for a long time. In his memory, he had never given Felicity Miller any gifts, and the only set of jewelry had been given by her to Serena. A friend visiting him saw the ring and suddenly exclaimed, "Isn't this the ring we threw into the sea during that bet?" He stared at the ring in his hand and suddenly remembered that day as well. That day, for the bet, they had thrown this ring into the sea, promising that whoever's female companion could find it, the land in Northwood District would belong to them. Although it was a bet, they had thoughtfully tied the ring securely to a fishing line and cast it into the sea with a fishing rod. But even so, no one dared to jump into the sea, except for Felicity Miller. She calmly asked the person who proposed the bet if it was real. After receiving an affirmative answer and a signed land transfer agreement, she jumped into the sea without hesitation. Watching the petite figure being swallowed by the waves, his hand gripping the railing turned white. Chapter 24, an unprecedented panic surged through his heart. In that instant, he even wanted to jump into the sea with her. But the next second, she emerged from the sea, tightly clutching that ring. The moment he held her tightly in his arms, he was filled with fear and a strange, inexplicable emotion. Fear that she would disappear into that sea. It was only now that he knew that emotion was affection, was love. It turned out that he had fallen in love with Felicity Miller back when she jumped into the sea to find the ring. Belated regret swept over his entire body. He covered his face and wept bitterly. The butler didn't return to the Shaw residence until late at night. Accompanying the butler was a car full of gifts. When Felicity Miller looked at these gifts with confusion, the butler quickly explained. He said that after Preston Ashworth saw the wedding ring, he cried for a long time and finally called someone to prepare a carload of gifts. He said it was compensation for her. Felicity Miller looked at the pile of gifts for a long time before finally opening them one by one. It was only then that she discovered Preston Ashworth's compensatory gifts covered her from age 1 to 18. In addition, for the 5 years of their marriage, he had prepared corresponding gifts for birthdays, anniversaries, New Year's, Kixi Festival Chinese, Valentine's Day adapted to Valentine's Day or a similar romantic occasion, Valentine's Day, etc. Every single one was something she liked. Something that could have been settled with just one phone call he had delayed for a full 7 years. She put down the last gift and looked up at the butler. Sell them all. Donate the money to the Welfare Institute. The day of parting drew nearer. It was unknown when they would meet again after this separation, so Frederick Shaw and Claire Shaw cleared their schedules to accompany her in exploring the entire city. From the sunset by the sea to the highest point of the Ferris wheel, from street side, candied fruits to the dessert after a meal at a high-end restaurant. This was the happiest period Felicity Miller had experienced in over 20 years. Claire, while putting food into her bowl, advised, "Eat more. It will be very difficult to find this taste once you go abroad." Although they had arranged for a chef and a housekeeper to go with Felicity, it was impossible to replicate the exact same taste in a foreign land. Felicity nodded obediently, eating mouthful after mouthful of the food Claire served her. On the day of their farewell at the airport, Felicity Miller saw Preston Ashworth, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. Unsure of his purpose for being there, Frederick Shaw and Claire Shaw protectively shielded her behind them. Looking at the man in the wheelchair, a flicker of pity crossed her face. But he acted as if he hadn't seen it and smiled. "Felicity, goodbye." Returning to Italy, Felicity Miller did not go back to her old apartment, but moved into the villa Frederick Shaw and his wife had prepared for her. The two servants she brought along quickly began cleaning the house, and the chef also started cooking for her. For the next week, besides having meals with friends she hadn't seen in a long time, she was busy searching for a venue to hold an art exhibition. Although busy, she was happy. Until one evening, she received a phone call. It wasn't from Frederick Shaw, nor from Claire Shaw, but from Mama Price. Mama Price said Alina Ashworth had passed away. Director Price wasn't clear about the complicated ins and outs between her and the Ashworth family, merely feeling that since Alina Ashworth had sponsored her, she should, if possible, return to pay her last respects. In the end, she made a trip back to her home country. Seeing the Ashworth residence draped in white mourning cloths, her heart grew heavy. After all, Alina had sponsored her. It didn't hurt to come and see. Entering the mourning hall, Felicity Miller also saw many others who had been sponsored by the Ashworth family. They nodded to each other, but had no further interaction. On the phone, Director Price had also briefly told her the cause of Alina Ashworth's death. Her health was already poor, and after being sent by Arthur Ashworth to the mountain villa for recuperation, her body grew weaker. The matters of Phoebe Ashworth being in prison and Preston Ashworth being disabled were well hidden. Until one day, Alina Ashworth on a whim wanted to chat with Phoebe. After all, in Alina's memory, Phoebe had only been sent to Australia. But when she dialed the number, there was no answer for a long time. In a panic, she asked the housekeeper. Only then did the housekeeper hesitantly reveal the truth. How could someone in prison answer her call? Overcome with anger and grief, Alina Ashworth suffered a heart attack and stopped breathing on the spot. Chapter 25. After entering the mourning hall, Felicity Miller immediately saw Arthur Ashworth, his hair completely white, and Preston Ashworth, sitting in a wheelchair with a numb expression. She held a chrysanthemum, stood before Alina Ashworth's portrait, bowed 3 times, placed the chrysanthemum in front of the portrait, and stared at Alina Ashworth's image for a long time, lost in thought. Her feelings about Alina Ashworth were complex. If she said she was grateful, Alina Ashworth had ruined 5 years of her youth. If she said she hated her, Alina Ashworth had also sponsored her, allowing her to continue her studies. But the dead cannot be brought back to life. Everything from the past dissipated with Alina Ashworth's death. Felicity Miller took one last look at Alina Ashworth's portrait before walking up to Arthur Ashworth and bowing slightly. "Mr. Ashworth, my condolences." Arthur Ashworth nodded but said nothing. She then walked up to Preston Ashworth, looked at him for a long time, and then said softly, "My condolences." Preston Ashworth gave a bitter smile and also said nothing. Because a direct relative had passed away, Phoebe Ashworth, who was in prison, was also brought out by prison guards. After her time in prison, Phoebe's face no longer held any arrogance. Her entire being was numb. Even when she saw Felicity, there was no ripple of emotion. It wasn't until she saw Alina Ashworth's portrait that Phoebe suddenly knelt on the ground and wailed. "Mother!" The guests who came to offer condolences couldn't help but turn their heads away. The day Alina Ashworth was buried, a light rain began to fall. With Alina Ashworth's passing, other prominent families also sent people to offer condolences. It was on this day that Frederick Shaw and Claire Shaw discovered she had secretly returned. But they said nothing. However, she still explained things to them. Claire hugged her. "If you were threatened, we wouldn't have let him off." In the cemetery, Claire and Felicity shared an umbrella, watching Alina Ashworth's coffin slowly being lowered into the ground. Beside them, Phoebe Ashworth was crying so hard she was about to faint, with 2 prison guards firmly holding her back. After the burial, the condoling guests left one by one. She and Claire walked at the very end, discussing their future plans. "Felicity," Preston Ashworth suddenly called out to her from behind. Felicity turned around and saw him standing in the rain, looking at her. "Can you walk with me for a bit?" Claire looked at her worriedly. If she so much as frowned, Claire would immediately decline on her behalf. Felicity tightened her grip on the umbrella, then finally relaxed it. The rain fell harder. She held the umbrella, walking beside Preston Ashworth. The Ashworth family's butler, who had hurried over, also held an umbrella for Preston, pushing his wheelchair towards the cemetery exit. "Felicity, I have no home anymore." The butler stopped pushing the wheelchair. Felicity also stopped and looked at him. His mother had passed away, his sister was in prison, he himself was disabled, and his father, busy training a new heir, hadn't been home in a long time, even being the first to leave this funeral. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but found she had nothing to say. What could she say? Wasn't this how they had interacted all these years? Perhaps also thinking of this, Preston Ashworth suddenly let out a bitter laugh. If only we could start over, how wonderful that would be. Then he could love her and protect her with all his heart. They wouldn't have reached this point. He wouldn't end up alone for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in the world. Preston Ashworth. The sound of the rain drowned out the external noises. For the first time, he heard Felicity Miller's words so clearly. Life doesn't give us a chance to regret and start over. We can only move forward. Whether it was him or herself, they could only keep moving forward. There would be no chance for them to start over. This was the 3rd year since their divorce, and for the first time, they could speak so calmly. "Let's part on good terms." When they first reunited, she had said this to him. At that time, his mind was filled with how to win her back. He hadn't understood the farewell in her words at all. The rain suddenly stopped. She also closed her umbrella and walked towards the main gate. "From now on, let's not meet again." Her figure gradually disappeared from his sight. "All right, goodbye, Felicity Miller."